I'm with the RSGB Convention Chair and the General Manager of the RSGB, Steve Thomas, M1ACB. Steve?
Yeah, I don't.
Is it time? It's not time to rest yet, is it?
No, not at all. We're in high activity time.
It is, but it's nice to see you, and and it's good to once we get started. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're here, as I said. This is the committee room.
Yep.
Can you tell us what is going on here?
Well, every year we have the special interest groups that come to the convention, and we have those. We're on two floors here at the convention. So the room downstairs, it was very, very full last year with your streaming studio and the special interest groups. And we love having the special interest groups because it gives a varied mix of amateur radio interest for people that come, and those groups, they love meeting all the convention goers. But this year, more special interest groups wanted to come. And the other thing that struck us was there's no National Hamfest this year. So National Hamfest is always very important for our committees, our teams, our groups, people to meet the staff from HQ, but they can do that at the convention. But we very often don't bring that many committees to the convention. So this year we decided we'd do that. So we brought quite a group of the committees and the teams of the RSGB to meet the convention goers, and that's what this room has turned into. So we've now got two rooms laid out as in sort of lounge style, and they're very busy, aren't they?
Exactly.
I remember you saying we want some atmosphere. Do you think we've got some?
We've got atmosphere in here, for sure,
Okay.
Steve.
Excellent.
Yeah. So can you take us through some of the committees that people can see if they come here? I should just mention, by the way, I haven't mentioned it yet today, and that is that if you are near Milton Keynes and you hadn't booked a ticket, but you like what you see and you'd like to come, it's not too late, because you can come and pay on the door for a day ticket for either today, Saturday, or tomorrow, Sunday, and you'll be able to get in. So just I've mentioned that now.
Oh, but, absolutely. Yeah, we love having people through the door. We do. We love having people on the live stream as well. Of course we do.
Yes.
Because we think that gives people a bit of a taste of the convention, and hopefully next year they'll actually come and be part of the atmosphere.
Absolutely,
that word. So there's much more to the convention than people do see on the live stream. So if they can come along in person, fantastic. We'd love to see them this year, next year, whenever.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to committees in this room.
Oh yeah, yep.
Who have we got?
I've got to check the list because we were organising this. Even last week we were still adding things. So apologies for looking at the list. But in this room especially, we've got some of the contest committees. So our three contest committees, HF, VHF, and the contest support committee. They've all got representation here. And of course they run some forums on Sunday as well about next year's rules and things like that. But there's a chance to come and speak to the contest committees and the people that run them. So they're here in the room. We've also got some of the exam groups as well. We've got the Exam Standards Committee and the ESRG, the Exam and Syllabus Review Group. So they're the people that actually set the standards for the exams. So if you want to come and talk to them about how you feel about exams, or what's coming next, then they're here for that. We've also got ARDF, Bob's here for Amateur Radio Direction Finding, and for those that don't know, I describe it as a mix between amateur radio and orienteering. So it's very activity based. So that group are here. We've got the Propagation Studies Committee, so Steve Nichols, I can see him over there. So propagation is something that it's a fascinating area, and often newcomers, I think they enjoy learning more about propagation, because to me it's part of the magic of radio. And the Propagation Studies Committee, absolutely world-leading people, and we've got plenty of talks here from them as well.
And it's a bit like, I always think of it as like the weather forecasting for radio amateurs. Because it allows you to plan, what am I going to do, what band am I going to work, am I going to work anything today? And so Propagation Studies so useful on the GB2RS News every week.
Absolutely. You've been talking to Jim Bacon, haven't you?
I think I have.
Relating it to weather forecasting. Absolutely. And the other group I want to mention is the youth group as well. So we sent some youth members over to Hungary for YOTA this year, and they're doing a talk. I can't remember if it's today or tomorrow, but they're doing a talk about how that youth camp was. But some of the youth group are actually here, so people can come and talk about youth activities. And that relates also to some other talks we're doing on build-a-thons and maybe taking those into schools. And we've got a whole talk about from people who have taken amateur radio into schools as well. So I know I'm veering off topic, but you know I do that.
No, not at all. I think yes, but there's lots to talk about, and I think hopefully everybody who cares about a hobby must care about youth, because they are the future of our hobby.
Absolutely, and it's one of the themes that we've got for the convention this year. There are quite a few. We were very pleased that we had more people who wanted to speak at the convention than we'd actually got slots for.
Wow.
Right, what a wonderful position to be in.
Yes, absolutely.
You know we're going to do some on tonight at 8. We'll move some people that way as well. But there are so many passionate people who want to talk about amateur radio, and the convention is here to try and help with that. And part of that is, of course, youth, and I think people doing practical things. That's another important factor, I think. So the Build-a-thon talks to that theme. And we've got ICQ Podcast here as well this year. They're working with us. They're running a couple of forums. So there's so much going on here.
Yeah.
We keep adding something every year. I love it.
It does make you feel
my favourite event of the year.
As you say, especially without the Hamfest, which is not quite the same, but I mean, without that, we wouldn't be able to get together socially, and it's so important.
It's a different feel, an event, and a lot of people go to both. Of course, they are very, very different animals. I think the convention and the Hamfest, but actually, people who cross over and go to both get a huge amount of interaction, social interaction.
I was going to say the social side is really important as well, isn't it? Because it's where we can meet the people that we've maybe worked on the air but never met, or haven't seen them for a year or two, and it's a great for that. And
meeting the people, that again, coming back to the committees, a lot of these people write columns for Radcom, so they are the experts in propagation, in all of those contesting that I mentioned earlier and everything. So those people write in Radcom, but this is a two-way dialogue, because you can come and actually, drink coffee with these people and pick their brains.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Steve, thanks very much for joining us for now. I think we're scheduled to talk again tomorrow afternoon as a sort of wrap-up, and we can review everything that's happened. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome back now. I've got Martyn Baker, G0GMB, with me now. He is the National Radio Centre Coordinator. So welcome Martyn, to the live stream. Firstly, I think in case anybody's unaware of what the NRC is all about, and I can't believe they wouldn't be, but can you just tell us a bit about the National Radio Centre?
Well, it's located at the Bletchley Park Museum, and it's free entry to RSGB members. They have to download a voucher from the members portal to get access. But otherwise, we welcome not only radio amateurs, but also many, many visitors who arrive to Bletchley Park Museum, walk through our front door each day.
And that's wonderful. And of course, as we should just mention as well, that voucher doesn't just entitle them to go into the NRC, but also to the whole of Bletchley Park. So
absolutely.
So it's a great benefit of RSGB membership. You just have to download it.
And current entry to Bletchley Park is £24.50 for an adult.
Wow.
So. And you can get in as many times.
That's nearly half the price of the membership.
It is,
so
absolutely.
Well worth it. Okay. So tell us what it's there, why it was set up.
Well, it was set up about 12 years ago now, long before I started as coordinator there, and it really helps to portray the value of wireless throughout. Generally, from its early days right through to modern day communication. We start off for the visitors with an introduction about the importance of wireless to Bletchley Park and how the intercept operators intercepted the messages and then passed them on to Bletchley for decrypting. That's the introduction, because we want a degree of continuity for people who've come to Bletchley Park for a day out. Beyond that, we talk about the technical development of wireless, the timeline, how it's evolved over the years. We have a technology area, we have an area that deals with the electromagnetic spectrum and how it's used. Moving through that, we get into amateur radio, specifically about how people can get started in amateur radio. And then we have all the amateur radio displays, where we have 5 or 6 different stations active concurrently.
Yeah, and we just seen one of those on the video that everybody at home has just been able to see as well. Yeah. And we should mention, of course, that although the RSGB built this and run it with your good self managing it, it's not just built for radio amateurs at all. It's actually meant for the general public to introduce radio to them, isn't it?
Absolutely. Introduce amateur radio to them, because even if you're not a radio amateur, you might have a neighbour who's an amateur, and it helps to understand why they need an aerial, why they need a mast. It might help to understand and have some degree of sympathy with EMC problems as well, and at least you can have an intelligent discussion then with the amateur. But even beyond that, what we do is we try and portray that radio communication plays a really important part in communication today. There's Wi-Fi, there's mobile phones,
all around
there's
us,
satellite communication, and there are huge career opportunities if you are at wireless RF technology. And so, especially with the youngsters, we try and encourage that. We at a career level, for those that are maybe 16, 17, 18, we talk about careers, but at the younger age group we talk about STEM type activities to explain about science and technology real time that can be derived from understanding radio or particularly satellite work.
So your visitors then, presumably as well as the general public, will involve schools and people like that coming to you?
Absolutely.
And you encourage that?
Yes. Bletchley Park as a museum has a whole programme of learning to do mainly with cryptography, but those school parties, many of them do come through the NRC, and we can use the opportunity to talk to them not only about the history aspect of radio, but also about the future career opportunities. And it's quite amazing, some of these FunCube satellites or the Oscar 100, there are so few experiments where you can immediately demonstrate the speed of electromagnetic waves, but travelling up to the Oscar 100 satellite and back again, about a quarter of a second delay, and you can hear that delay.
And that's not just, unlike schools where most of them were just going to use a whiteboard or a video to show that. This is for real. You show this with a real, you've got aerials and everything set up and radios to talk to the Oscar 100 satellite.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. How many visitors do you get in a year? I mean, it sounds like it should be incredibly popular.
Well, it does vary. On a day-to-day basis, we could expect to have anything between about 100 to 400 on a typical day. But
that's during the week as well?
That's during the week.
Every day it's open, I presume?
We're open 7 days a week, yeah. So weekdays, kind of probably 1 to 400. It does depend on how many people are visiting Bletchley Park.
Of course, yeah.
At the weekends, it tends to be higher, easily 400 most weekend days. In the school summer holidays, we've seen 500, 600, 700, and I think on one occasion we actually had 900 people come through the doors in a single day.
So, that's what, if you're open, say, 8 or 9 hours, that's 100 an hour?
Well, it could be.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. But pre-COVID, we had 97,000 visitors in a single year in 2019. Visitor numbers to visitor attractions such as Bletchley Park have dropped since COVID, but last year we ran at 76,000 and we're anticipating similar, maybe 80,000 visitors this year.
These are big numbers though, Martyn. I know you live with this every day, but to me, honestly, that's huge numbers of
when you look at some of the football or rugby matches that go on and they say, well, the stadium holds 80,000 people, you think that's the number of people that walk. That's the number of people that have been introduced to amateur radio. Now, they don't all stay for half an hour or an hour, some are just walking through, but at least we're giving them an insight.
So, to run a station like to run the NRC, to run like this, you must depend on lots of people to help run it. And 7 days a week, volunteers. So where do you get your volunteers from?
Well, the RSGB are very good at advertising through Radcom and the RSGB News, and the request is that they are RSGB members. We have a team of about 55 volunteers at this point in time, but there's a constant churn because, like a lot of volunteers, whether it's with the RSGB or any other organisation, they tend to be the slightly more mature person, and there is a natural churn.
Of course, and it's a big commitment, isn't it?
And absolutely.
So what do you look for, and if someone's interested in becoming a volunteer, what are the criteria that you look for?
Well, they have to be within reasonable travelling distance to start with, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. We look for a minimum commitment of 1 day a month, although the majority of the volunteers do 2 days a month. So typically, and usually people agree to do a specific day. So somebody might come in every Thursday, some might come in once a Thursday, some might come in once a month on a Thursday, but we try and keep the teams so we get a really good team spirit. Nobody has to be super knowledgeable. We've got M7s, foundation licensees who are volunteers, as well as some of the more long-term radio amateurs, if I could use that term, the people who have been in it for a good number of years. You don't have to be super knowledgeable. The main criteria is a willingness and an ability to engage with the visitors. Yes, you have to demonstrate amateur radio, but you might only be doing that for a small percentage of the day. It's about engaging and drawing people in and explaining. Because if I start, people often ask, what do you talk about? Well, okay, what do we talk? I turn that around. I said, if you went down to the pub or the social club and you met somebody, what would you talk about? Or you met them for the first time. It might be exchanged names, do you live locally, etc. But beyond that, it's about trying to make amateur radio kind of relevant to them so a lay person can understand. And if I see somebody that I think is probably late 50s, early 60s in age, I would say to them, do you remember the days of Radio Luxembourg, Radio Caroline? And they'd say, oh yes, we used to tune it. I used to hide under the bedclothes. My parents never. I said, they probably.
It wasn't
did.
Just me then.
It wasn't. But and it faded and it distorted, and then you can say, well, do you know why? And you give a little bit of explanation, a simple explanation about the ionosphere. But you've kind of drawn them in immediately. Now, if I'd started off and talking about the ionosphere and this, you'd have seen them glaze over.
And I guess you're not trying to recruit them all into our wonderful hobby, but it must happen, I presume, that you have people who come around for the first time, take a little interest, and then you hear about them actually going further and maybe taking their license.
So we've got quite a few examples of people who have come in. We had a gentleman that came to the 1940s weekend a couple of weeks ago at the Bletchley Park, and he'd been 2 years before with his wife. His wife wanted to see the 1940s weekend. The guy came in and he saw the GB3RS, and we also had the special event SOE station running, and he was blown away with it. He went home straight away, studied, got his foundation license, went on to get his intermediate license, now studying for his full. As one example, another example is a father and a young daughter who came in a couple of years ago, got involved with the Morse side of things, the Morse snail keys, went home, had fun, started to pick up the radio, came back again, met one of the volunteers, and they were so smitten with it, they went home, father and daughter studied, got their foundation. Now the father's looking to come back and become a volunteer and bring the young daughter along with it, which helps us, because if the young daughter comes in and is with the father, it's
really inspirational to other young people as well.
Absolutely.
I've always found that young people, nobody engages better with young people really than other young people doing something. Especially if they've come through that route, you can tell them or they can tell the visitors themselves how they've come into the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a note here that there was some event recently, the Enigma Reloaded. Was that a big event for the?
Well, it was a big event in a way, but big in a kind of a small scale kind of thing. And the reason for that is because it's an event that has run 7 times now, and it's run by the amateur radio group of the Italian Naval College, and they transmit an encrypted message via Morse code, just as might have been done in World War II. And they transmit that message out to museums around the world. But the criteria is the museum must have an Enigma machine. Now, we had at the NRC, we had a team of 5 CW operators who were listening into this message, writing it down. Of course, it's encrypted. Now, if you and I were learning Morse or knew Morse and you missed the letter L, out of the word hello, you'd still be able to guess what the word was. But of course, if it's encrypted, it's just a jumble of letters. So it's got to be absolutely perfect. So we had the team of 5 CW operators. They write the message down, they compare, and then Bletchley Park brought down an Enigma machine, a genuine World War II Enigma machine down, set it up, and invited members of the public to come and press the keys from the message that had been received, and of course out popped the plain text message at the far end.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And that really inspired the visitors. It was a ticketed event, and we had 4 events, and they were all sold out within an hour.
Wow.
And,
so you'll be doing that again?
Yes, but of course we can only do it when the Italian Naval College run it, which is normally once a year.
Good. Finally, just talk about, I understand that there's been donation of JY1 equipment.
Yes.
That's what I got to know. I don't know any more than that, and I'm sure a lot of people watching don't, so tell us about that.
Well, a number of months ago, we were aware that some radio equipment that belonged to the late King Hussein of Jordan was going up for auction. And I was contacted by the late King's private pilot. Now, King Hussein was affiliated with the RSGB, and he'd done an interview, and he was a member of the Harrow Radio Club. And Queen Noor was looking to, because the late King died a number of years ago, was looking to downsize and I guess clear out basically. And we're talking about his UK radio equipment, I need to stress that. And the private pilot said, do we really need this to go to auction, or would it like to go to the RSGB? So we had a long period of negotiation, and eventually it was donated to the NRC. And we have now got all 3 radios on display. There's one receiver which is now in the timeline, and then we've got a VHF and an HF transceiver, which are naturally on the radio bench and are available for visiting radio emitters to use.
And they're in use?
They're in use.
Wow, that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the NRC sounds fantastic. If you haven't already been, I can recommend it. I've been there a few times now filming and just visiting, and it's wonderful to visit. We've got a website we're now going to put on the screen for you if you don't know about it already, and it's coming up now. And in fact, in a moment as well, we're going to play out a video to tell you all about it. But thanks very much to Martyn Baker for telling, and thanks to you and all of your colleagues for all the work they do to make a wonderful display. If you haven't been yet, please do go. Thanks, Martyn.
And I'm joined now by Ciaran Morgan, M0XTD, and Ciaran's from the ARIS organisation. Hi, Ciaran.
Hello, Steve. Nice to see you.
Yeah, well, we see each other occasionally, don't we? But definitely at these events. So tell us a little bit about what you do for ARIS and what ARIS is, because it's easy to say ARIS and not explain all of the activity that's behind it. So give us the story.
There's quite a lot. For starters, I'm the RSGB representative to what's called ARIS International, which is the overarching body that looks after everything. And underneath that, you've got the individual ARIS organisations for the different continents that appear. So, for example, there's ARIS USA, there's ARIS Russia, there's ARIS Europe, ARIS Japan. But basically, they are the sole mechanism by which all of the space agencies talk to the amateur radio community and provide amateur radio facilities on the International Space Station. Hence
so that's what ARIS stands for.
That's the title, amateur radio on the International Space Station.
Excellent. Now, we've been working, I suppose, on together since I joined the RSGB 7.5 years ago, and I joined just when Tim Peake was on the space station. So I had this wonderful introduction to doing the general manager's job, where you were going out to all these schools, and I got to go and attend some of these things. So I've felt it firsthand, but it's an amazing way to get technology into schools, isn't it?
It's phenomenal. It really does have an impact. The whole basis behind an ARIS contact is an educational journey for the school, where they look at STEM and STEAM activities, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and latterly with art as well.
Yeah.
But it's a great way of putting an alternative view of the curriculum into schools to excite and enthuse students and get them curious about careers in the science and technology and mathematics arena, which is the ultimate goal, which is to provide the next generation of scientists, engineers, RF engineers especially, and get them into the hobby itself as well, which is a great.
That's what we all want. Of course, new people coming into amateur radio, but it can be very difficult to get time in schools, can't it? Because of the curriculum and everything that the teachers have got to do. So, I suppose by blending what you do into the curriculum or seeing the benefits of it, is that the way it works?
Pretty much. So we get schools to put forward what we call an educational plan, and that is a mix of in-lesson activities that they do. So they can include things like history, so the history of the space race can come from the Cold War, and they can bring all of that into it as well. They can bring cookery and learning about the different types of food that can and can't be used on space. But generally, the educational plan is the thing that ties all the different activities, be it in the lessons or in after-school clubs, all together.
So this brings all the different elements you've just talked about together, with space being the glue to
space
that brings
and
it all
communications
together.
being the main glue.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent. Now, but of course, as part of that, if all goes well, you run this, what I know you describe as an experiment with the youngsters, to say, and you have that contact, which comes along with that wow factor, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and it very much is an experiment, because everything we do is an experiment. We emphasise that, and in the Tim Peake series of contacts, we had two very classic examples of that, where we had difficulty getting the first contact at Sandringham, and a little bit of difficulty as well at Broadstairs.
Well, Sandringham School was the very first one that I went to, so I was new in post and went to that, and it was amazing.
It was actually my first hour's contact in charge.
Was it?
It was.
Okay.
So I'd taken part in other hours contacts and helped in them before, but then had a break before coming into the actual contact itself at Sandringham. So there was many months of planning that went into that first one.
I've got so many memories from that first one. Not only because the press were there in force, weren't they? All of the media were there for that one, that very first one.
And it was on BBC Breakfast as well.
Yeah, that was it. They were all lined up at the back of the room, weren't they? So absolutely no pressure at all, Ciaran.
No.
And the other thing I remember was Alan Gray, the head there, taking everybody out into the playground to see the ISS go over the pass before while it was still moonlit. Do you remember that? And that just set everybody's, the hairs on the back of the head were up really.
Well, it was very much the case of, there's a little dot going across the sky. There's somebody in there, and the next time we see that dot, we're actually going to be talking to them. But yes, it was a magical moment once we got contact.
Oh, it's brilliant. And for the youngsters, they got licensed as well, or some of them did, didn't they, beforehand?
Yes, we did.
So they could actually make the call.
Yes.
So there was clubs that were involved in training them to do their license, so they could actually make the initial call. Was it Jessica?
Jessica,
right?
yes.
Yeah, there we go. See, how many years ago was this? And I still remember her name.
Oh yes, yes we do. That was something that we pushed forward as part of the Principia programme, of actually integrating the amateur radio exam into the activities as well. Not just as a way of increasing the number of radio amateurs, but actually getting them interested in the technology that we were using to actually carry out the contact. And it has worked really well in some schools. Sandringham is a classic example. They've gone on to do some fantastic outreach. And have a very active amateur radio club.
I think it helps there that the head is a very active radio amateur as well.
Very much so.
Which really you know, you can get in there then, can't you?
You can,
really well.
and that's key to the ARIS experience, if you like.
Yeah.
It's having someone in a school who's enthusiastic, who's interested. It's a bonus if they're a radio amateur, because they know what's involved. But getting that special link, if you like, is the thing that really makes an ARIS contact
absolutely
work.
I'm going to do another one of my memories as well.
Okay.
There was the Sandringham one definitely stands out because it was the first, but the one that made me the most nervous was when we did the YOTA camp 2017.
Yes.
And this is where the experiment became of some very good words, didn't it, to use to
very
describe
real.
it? Yeah.
Yes. So in the YOTA event, we had a failure of the VHF radio downlink. So
that was actually up on the space station.
That was up on the space station, the failure itself. I don't think we ever got to the bottom of what was the problem, but it precipitated the replacement of the radios with the new generation. But the downlink wasn't working. We had no carrier whatsoever. So we were trying, the first time we were trying to do a VHF uplink, which could be heard, and then trying a ham TV downlink, which was a bit of a challenge because there was a typical sort of 6-7 second delay between asking something and waiting for a reply to come back. But yes, that very much was an experiment. It didn't work the first time.
The orbit is
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
So I got on the phone straight away to my contact in Houston.
I remember seeing it.
And uttering the famous words of Houston, we have a problem. And Kenneth worked wonders with mission control and with the flight directors, and we relocated Paolo Nespoli, who was the astronaut at the time, across into the service module, and carried on the contact on the second pass.
So your mobile phone call to NASA had the astronauts moving around on the space station so that we had another go 90 minutes later.
You could say that, yes.
It was amazing to be there, it really was, but there was some very nervous, you want it to work, don't you, when everybody's there? You
do, and at the back of the mind, I'm always nervous and apprehensive, and never sure that the contact is going to happen until I hear the words coming back from the astronaut that we've made contact itself.
But everybody in the room, I put something on Twitter the other day when you mentioned an upcoming contact, which we'll come to, and I just said you never forget the feeling when the astronaut replies. I don't think the people that are there, you get that reply and wow, we're on. It's happening. Does it still do that for you?
It does. It really does. And every contact is separate, is special, is unique, and brings its own challenges in terms of doing it. But it's the nervousness and the apprehension. You can do as much planning and preparation as you want to do, but it's that call. Whenever you make that initial call and you let go of the PTT and all you hear is static coming back, you think, oh, have we done something wrong? Have we done something wrong? But it does eventually come through more times than enough. But it still it really gets you.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
So have there been many in the UK since the Tim Peake activity?
We've done, since Tim Peake, we've done 17, including 10 with Tim. So we've done about another 7. So we're averaging about 1 a year afterwards, which is a good average for us at the moment.
Well, they're pretty busy up there, aren't they? When they're up there, and it's fairly expensive to get them up there, and they've got plenty of work to do. So
they do. But we do average, as ARIS International, we do average between 80 and 100 of these contacts every year, and that's spread across the world.
And that's amazing commitment from the astronauts and the space agencies to act to that, which sort of puts it in perspective about how important it is.
It is to the space agencies because it's a unique outreach capability that has been replicated in many ways as well. So We did the first school contacts, and now we're seeing the space agencies do their own school contacts where they have their astronauts on the video links as well. We did the first ejecting a spacesuit to out into space, SuitSat 1, which was packed full of amateur radio equipment. Now we've got CubeSats being deployed from the space station. So there's a history of where ARIS goes and leads.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of activity behind it, not just the contacts that you have in schools. Everything grows from it.
Yes.
So tell us about the activity that's coming up next week, I believe.
So next week we're straight after the colloquium and the convention, where the team is heading down to Broadstairs in Kent. This is the school of young Isabella Payne, who made the headlines last year by contacting Chell Lindgren and having a little conversation with him, and which Chell subsequently posted a picture of her on his iPad, which was very nice. But yes, we're heading down there. We're setting up Monday and Tuesday, getting the kids into the frame of mind of the contact itself, and hopefully on Wednesday at 10:57 local time, we'll be speaking to astronaut Jasmine Mugbelly.
Okay, and people will be able to listen to that as it goes over.
Downlink is audible all over Europe, so 145.800, and you can hear it. You won't be able to hear the uplink, but that's normal. But the event will be live streamed as well, so you can watch it at live.aris.org, and you'll be able to hear both sides of the questions as well.
Excellent. Okay, so that was just before 1 p.m, wasn't it?
Just before 11 p.m.
Just before 11 p.m. Okay, 145.800.
145.800.
Excellent. Okay, well I think we're moving on to something else now in the convention, Ciaran. So fantastic talking to you, and fantastic working with you. The RSGB and AMSAT and ARIS all working together is I think invaluable. It's really wonderful the work that you all do.
It's a great example of collaboration.
Oh yeah.
That really does deliver something.
Yeah, brilliant. I hope it goes well next week.
Thank you very much.
And we've got the chair of Propagation Studies Committee, I did it again, Steve Nichols, G0KYA, and Chris Deacon, G4IFX, who is the secretary.
Correct.
Propagation
of the Propagation Studies Committee.
All right, welcome to you both. So, where are we on propagation? I think this is where we should start now. We've heard about propagation. We're definitely in propagation cycle 25.
Yep, we are, and we're on the hopefully still on the increase or the growth period of solar cycle 25, and we're currently in a really good point. The solar flux index is high enough that we're getting 10-meter openings, so it's a very good time to be here. They're now predicting that the peak will probably be towards the end of next year, maybe autumn next year. So that's been brought forward from about 2026 to 2025, because they're always looking at the sun and saying, well, let's have a look. I mean, some of the original predictions for solar cycle 25, it was going to be record breaking, but they've been scaled back a lot. I think it will be a little bit better maybe than the last cycle, which wasn't terribly impressive, but I don't think we'll see some of these SFI 300 numbers that they were talking about originally.
So we've got probably at least a good year?
Oh yeah, we've got a good year.
I've heard of a certain Mr. McIntosh thought that it was maybe even going to be starting to
I
tell
wasn't
down.
going to use his name, but
well,
he's a professional scientist,
absolutely,
got lots of ideas,
yeah.
But you do put your neck on the block when you start predicting what's going to happen with the sun.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, it is prediction, and
absolutely,
forecasting things. So that's HF. What about VHF, Chris?
Well, I mean, if you look at the low end of VHF, like 6 meters, my thing, we're just at the cusp of whether the cycle is going to get high enough to really give us that really long distance F2 propagation around the world. I mean, sporadic E happens all the time, anyway, and that's been doing loads of interesting things the last few years. But the F2, I'm not quite as optimistic. I don't know. I hope it's at the end of next year as well in terms of the max, because that way it's got time to carry on going up. but it's certainly going up at the moment, and it's already higher than Cycle 24 ever got to. So it's looking good from that point of view, but we don't know. It's somewhere between that.
I would say that.
Yeah. The thing about VHF though that's different also is that it's inherently more difficult, even more difficult to predict than an HF. But there's so many different ways you can communicate. 2 meters 70 cms, it's proper. How does that work then? And that leads us into asking questions which are getting into the citizen science sort of world. And Steve sort of leads very well on the outreach stuff, doing stuff for the membership. We're also the hub of a sort of a research community as well, encouraging people to look into these things and starting things like you did that Grey Line project.
Yeah.
We saw Peter Dutton-Smith yesterday, trying to get interest in people getting involved in a research into long delay echoes.
Yes,
which is really fascinating stuff.
We saw part of that
and
lecture,
amateurs have got a lot to contribute to that, so we're trying to promote that too.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you, I know you've got obviously a strong committee yourself, but how much do you depend as well on regular amateurs giving information, spotting stuff? Do you rely on them at all?
Yeah, I rely on them for GB2RS because we have to come up with a propagation prediction for the next 10 days, which is a little bit difficult. But if people are saying, I managed to work this or I managed to work that, it gives you a feeling for what the bands are doing. And that's very useful. So we do like to hear from people on what they're working.
Same for you, Chris, as well?
Absolutely. There's only half a dozen of us on the actual Propagation Studies Committee, but when we have quite a large network of corresponding members.
Yeah, over 20 actually, I just checked.
Over 20. Some of them are actually academics, some of them are people like us. Also, in my research and what Gwyn G3ZIL has been doing, we're actually using amateur data to produce published scientific work. So yes is the answer.
And actually, I don't know, some of our viewers may have stayed with us later yesterday when we did something rather, which was totally unplanned, with Gwyn, looking at the states where we have the eclipse and the facts, and we'll hopefully look back at it later as well. But to see what that information, you're going to use that data to sort of
there's a community called HAMSI in the US that we're plugged into, we're part of, who are doing a really major exercise with a special contest and everything around the eclipse to collect exactly that data. But then there's a total eclipse in April next year in the States, and that's going to be really interesting too.
When we had the solar eclipse in the UK a few years back, we did a big sort of outreach exercise with that, and we got radio hams, and we were trying to think how can we show how this is going to affect. So I suggested listening to medium wave stations because when the eclipse happened, it reduced the delay a little bit, so suddenly medium wave stations from distances came about. And I was really surprised that people said, I could hear Radio Luxembourg or whatever in London, and then as the eclipse ended, it disappeared again. So
so there really is a correlation and a relationship between those things.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Earlier on you mentioned outreach. So does that presumably could incorporate schools and include schools? Are they interested in or maybe colleges?
We don't really do much with schools unless they ask for it. But I've supplied a handout for the centre at Bletchley, the National Radio Centre at Bletchley, and we give presentations all over the place. We produce videos that are used. That's made life a lot easier because people say, can you come give us a presentation? Where are you? Orkney Islands? No, not really. So we produced a video, and they've had thousands of views. They're freely available on YouTube. So there's an introduction to HF, and there's an introduction to VHF as well that looks at auroral modes, aircraft scatter, and things like that. So the videos, I think, are a way of getting the message out there. So we'd like to involve other people as well.
And how far are you looking ahead now? I know we're still discussing about cycle 25, how long that's going to last, but are you already starting to think about cycle 26?
I hadn't until you just mentioned it.
I'm sorry about that, but I think this is a question though that we were all waiting for 25 for ages. I remember we did pieces, you and me, and lots of things. But we're here now. But when do you start thinking about the next cycle?
I think once we start. Cycle 25 starts declining, I think. It won't decline instantly, it's not like switched off, it will take a few years to decline. Then we'll have that awful sort of doldrums period where the propagation is always the same for, apart from the sort of monthly changes, but when the SFI goes down to about 68 and stays there for months and months and months on end, it's very difficult to come up with new ideas. But I will promise you I'll start thinking about Cycle 26.
So maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year.
We're here, we'll talk about that.
Years,
Finally, for people at home who haven't used it yet, I mean, they can actually have a look at what the work that you do. We've got a website that's going to come up on the bottom of the screens now, which is rsgb.org/PSC. I believe that's.
I can't remember.
I think it is. I think it's coming up on the screen.
Whatever you say, you know more than we do. Yeah, there's information on there, and I was just speaking to a couple of the youngsters here saying I'm totally bamboozled by propagation, which I understand, but said, well, we've got a book available which introduces publication, lots and lots of stuff on the website. We've got online tools that are completely free to use, so we do as much as we can to get the word out there.
Wonderful. And we've got to remember that it's the propagation that makes what we do different from doing Skype to your auntie in Australia.
Yeah.
It's because it bounces off the ionosphere. That's what it's all about.
And it's nice to know how you're going to plan, what bands I'm going to be using,
absolutely.
what aerials to put up, for going on holiday, what I might be able to work and everything.
Yeah. I'm telling everybody now, from my perspective, get on 10 metres now.
Oh yeah.
Right.
10 metres, October, near sunspot maximum. It doesn't get any better.
So 10 metres is the band.
Definitely. Yeah.
Steve, Chris, thanks ever so much for joining us today. Thanks for all the work as well you do for the community, because it really does help us plan and make the most of our hobby. Thanks for joining us today. It's really lovely to welcome Gwyn Griffiths, G3ZIL. Gwyn, hello.
Hello, Dave. Pleasure to meet you.
And you, and only about an hour ago you came over to us and said, actually, something's happening in America. I wonder if you'd be interested in it.
Yes.
And for those of you who know, it's an annular eclipse. Right. So firstly, maybe you could just tell everybody what an annular eclipse is, and then we'll say why it's significant to radio amateurs.
So a full eclipse, a total eclipse of the sun, is when the moon blocks out the entirety of the sun's disk. That will happen over North America in April next year. But today, 15 minutes ago, this annular eclipse started at Oregon. And the annular eclipse is where the moon doesn't quite cover the entire sun, so that you see a ring of the sun's fire around the outside. So it's very dangerous. You mustn't look at an annular eclipse. So why for the radio amateur? Well, I'm part of the ham-sci community. So on this screen here we have a very simple URL, hamsci.org, and I'd encourage you to look at this. So this is a collaboration between amateur radios, the hams, and professional scientists interested in the ionosphere. Now, as the sun is eclipsed by the moon, there's a short-term night. It gets dark. That's what you see in the visible spectrum with your eyes. But that darkness also affects the level of ionization in the ionosphere. And in particular, it happens very quickly in the lowest layer, the so-called D layer, which is about 80 kilometers above the Earth's surface. During the day, the D layer is highly ionized by the sun, and it absorbs low-band signals. So radio amateurs on 160, 80, 40 in particular will see their signals, their long-range signals, disappear. They'll be absorbed by the D layer. So what happens when you then switch off the ionization for a few minutes as the sun passes? Does the D layer ionization decrease suddenly? And do you suddenly then get an increase in the propagation? Do paths open up again briefly?
And do you genuinely don't know that yet?
I mean, there's little that's truly unknown, but there were some experiments 2017 in the US for some of those aspects, and they looked at multiple bands. But we have new technologies, and in particular now we have a digital mode called FST4 that allows us to look at the spread, the frequency spread of the signal, how much Doppler shift is generated in the ionosphere. We didn't have that back then. And we also have the ability to look at the noise level. So because the D region absorbs signals, at sites that have very low local noise, so those are actually quite scarce these days, the noise propagates in from the outside into the site. So they see a very pronounced dip in the noise level as the sun rises, and it's a maximum dip at midday. So what happens to that noise? So that's an integrated quantity because that's coming in from all around. So you're not looking at a very narrow path across the eclipse. You're able to see the entirety of an area. So perhaps there might be a bigger signal in the noise.
So, and not only are we talking about the theory of what might happen,
Yep.
you've got friends and colleagues in the States, I believe, who
I
have
do.
got equipment set up. Before we do
Yes.
that, maybe we can look at this, which is the plan of what's happening in terms of various parts of the States and there.
Yes.
Maybe you could just talk us quickly through this if Kevin can zoom in. Kevin's our cameraman.
Right,
here,
and
he's just
I'm
gonna
going to
zoom
use
into
my,
this.
my finger as a
Right.
pointer. So we have the coast of Oregon, where about now 20 minutes ago the eclipse crossed the coast and is now progressing on its way through the states of Nevada, Utah, and on to Texas, and it will end the crossing of the continental USA in the Gulf of Mexico in about 25 minutes' time. So that's the time frame from it, and you can see perhaps on the chart that it's a narrow strip of the total of the loss of light under the path of the eclipse. And so what a number of radio amateurs, as part of the Hamsai Festival of Eclipse Science, have specially set up several transmitters. They're shown in red, transmitting on multiple bands at the same time, because this is a transient, short-lived phenomena. We want to get as much information across many bands as possible in the time available. And the receiver sites are in yellow, and they're using software-defined radios that ordinarily give you 8 or 14 channels of information at the same time. So that's the network that, in particular, my colleagues in the US have deployed specially for today.
So how can we see the results? How can we see the data from those receivers?
So all of that data flows in real time. Many radio amateurs are familiar with the Whisper protocol, but we're using FST4W. It's slightly different, but all of that comes in live to a database and includes the measurement of noise and spectral spread. So we can go onto the screen here now, and we can look at that data that was last updated 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
So,
right, well, let's have a look at it, and you'll point these out in here, and then we're going to be able to show them a close-up picture, everybody at home in a moment.
And I'm going to refresh the screen to bring up the very latest data. So in the top panel, these are time series where the x-axis along the bottom here spans 2 days. So we're looking at results from yesterday right up until 2 minutes ago. And the top panel, the y-axis here is the signal-to-noise ratio. Okay, so
so everybody at home now can see a closer picture. Just to explain, so we've loaded this onto a laptop.
Fantastic.
Into the mixer here, so we can see this in more detail.
Okay.
So although we can't see your finger where you're pointing, so maybe you could just quickly describe where you're looking.
Okay. So the horizontal axis, this is a time series graph. The horizontal axis is time, and we're looking at a span from left to right of 2 days, 48 hours. So we're seeing day-night variations. The band is set to 40 meters, that's what we're looking at. And the y-axis of the graph is the signal-to-noise ratio. And that would be very familiar to those interested in Whisper or FT8. It's the SNR that the program gives you. That's the top display. And each of the individual yellow dots is one measurement. And we see gaps because on 40 meters during the day, there is no path. From the transmitter here is WB6CXC in wine country, Santa Rosa, California. And the path, the receiver, is the northern Utah SDR site, KA7OEI. So it's a path of about 900 kilometers.
I'm just going to help people at home who haven't maybe got a clear screen, as we can see here in the studio.
Yep.
So we've got the signal to noise ratio on the top graph, so
Yes.
moving up the left axis.
Yes.
The middle graph, we've got the spectral width in megahertz.
Millihertz.
Oh, millihertz. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Millihertz, yes.
mhertz. Yeah,
Yes.
small m.
Yes.
Hertz, millihertz.
Yeah.
I just want to make people to and the time. This is timeline underneath, isn't it?
Correct.
With the
Yes.
time and the date, obviously, which is the 13th.
Yeah. So what we're looking at here now, and this is live data. I'm sure the ionospheric physicists will be poring over this and other reception paths for many months to come. But what can we see, Dave, right now? Well, so yesterday, the signal level, and so I'm looking at the middle of the graph,
at the top,
where the yellow dots rise to a peak, and they peak at about 1500 UTC, and then they fall away. That's the normal pattern for a day on 40 meters, and then the band closes. There's too much attenuation, too much absorption in the D layer to support that signal on 40 over that 900 kilometer path. That's normal daytime propagation. So towards the very right-hand side, this is now current data coming in. So we see high SNR that was earlier, several hours ago, and then the band closed. But now, in the last hour or so, we've seen some sporadic spots. And I think when you look back onto the previous days, there have been no such thing as the sporadic occasional spots that we are seeing now on the very right hand of the display.
Yeah, because we can see that's quite a lot more erratic than some of the others, which have got more of a smooth pattern.
Correct. And there's a lot of continuity, even though there's scatter in the center plot, for instance. There is a clear shape to that. And there are no gaps between all of those spots in that center panel. But what we see on the right, that's happening right now, there are some isolated signals making their way across that 900 kilometer path. Now, I'm not saying that that is because of lower D region absorption, but it's a theory. One can try out.
So so far from what you've seen, I know this is early and you're just looking at it live.
Yes.
Is this what you expected to see from the theories, or is it something different?
It's what we would expect to see because of lower D region absorption. The signal can then make its way on a path that would normally be closed at this time of day, because it's into the mid-morning now on that path between California and Utah.
Wonderful. Well, look, this is really fantastic. If we've got time tomorrow, would you come back to tell us when you've got the finished results from the States, and just give us a...
I'm not going to be finished tomorrow, but
just to give us an idea.
There's one more plot I want to look for.
Right.
I want to look for. So if we can select the next tab called noise and then do a refresh. Well, okay, so now we're looking at the noise level, and each day this is at a wonderful location right on the coast near San Francisco. It's a heritage maritime radio site called KFS, a wonderfully low quiet location, and on the left hand side of the screen what you can see in that curved bottom shape is the D region absorption. So it's noise level now on the y-axis. The noise has gone down, it reaches a minimum at local noon, and then it rises again as the sun starts to set. And then during the night you have a consistent noise level because all of that noise is being propagated in to this very quiet site. Now, earlier on today, I thought that sorry, we've got a problem with the screen because we're it's right, we need to press, if you can, the time selector where it says red in UTC. It's changed itself, and you need to click on that and then scroll down to where it says last 2 days, and click, and right, okay.
I should explain that we're doing this absolutely live, and Tammy is operating the computer that we're watching this on. If it looks a bit jumpy, this is why. But this is really happening, isn't it? So talk us through this then.
Okay.
Gwyn.
Well, thank goodness, because I could not have explained what the previous screen was showing. But now that this is showing, right, I am looking at this just at exactly the same time that everybody else is looking at this. So now we're seeing the noise. So these dips that are the semicircles are D-region absorption reaching a maximum absorption, so minimum noise around local noon. That's what happened yesterday towards the middle of the graph. That's what's happened the previous day. And it's consistent day to day at this very low noise side. But what do we see today with the eclipse? Something completely different.
Okay.
I'm seeing this for the first time. I'm rather excited about
No,
this.
this is good.
So what I'm looking at is at the very right-hand side, which is the most recent data, we have those dots, the noise level, are in green. In blue is the noise level at the same time yesterday. And we've seen previously that each day is absolutely repeatable.
So the other ones, I mean, are much more consistent. The graphs are following each other. But here we can see they're parted quite a lot.
You can
this is
see
looking
that
at the far right-hand screen.
You don't need a degree in radio propagation
I haven't got one, so
science,
that's just as well, isn't it?
to see that the green dots, which are today affected by the eclipse, the noise level is higher. That's higher because the D region absorption is less because the sun has been shut out by the eclipse.
Same questions asked a minute ago.
Yep.
Is this what you expected to see?
This is what I expected. Well, this is what I hoped to see, but I've not had experience of this measurement before. This is a site that, if you're going to see it anywhere, you're going to see it here because of the very low local noise. This would be very difficult for the average amateur in a suburban garden with all of the myriad of electronic noises and interferences that we have to observe this. It is, well, I mean, I'm looking at the scale now, so that's 2 divisions on there, and I need to go across. So that's 10 dB, 10 decibel difference, which is very measurable at this site at KFS. Were I to select a typical amateur, and we have one in the middle of San Francisco, that line would be flat. They would not see it.
Fascinating.
So it's wonderful that these heritage radio stations are keeping going, that they allow radio amateurs to install their own equipment onto these commercial antennas and to provide all of the infrastructure such that we can acquire this data in real time. 2 minutes ago, that's what was happening. And so if you click again on the update button, we can see if it's changed. And if we had a little more time, what I'm sure would happen, or one can make a prediction, is that the noise level would go back down after the effect of the eclipse has passed.
Well, maybe if we've got a bit of time tomorrow, we could just have a quick look then at how it's changed when you've got the benefit of all of the history of what's happening today live now in America. Gwyn, thank you very much indeed. I know you're part of the Propagation Studies Committee, aren't you?
I'm a corresponding member of the Propagation Studies Committee.
Well, it's wonderful of you to share this with us as well. This has been live, as you all know, and it's been really fascinating to understand it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
It's good to now meet Liam Robbins. Let's get your course on G5LDR. Hello, Liam.
Hello.
So you're here to, it's again one of the committees of the RSGB.
Yes.
And obviously predominantly involved with youth.
Yes. Hopefully entirely involved with youth. We want to get as many younger people and as much fresh blood and excitement into the hobby in the RSGB as possible. We had a team of 4 that went to the Jota camp in Hungary this year, hoping to send another 4 this year. So if you are a young person in amateur radio, whatever license you've got, when the application's open, please send me an application and we'll see if we can send you on next year's camp.
So where's next year's camp?
Oh, we don't know yet. We hopefully they'll tell us just before Christmas, like last year, and applications will open just into the new year around February.
Okay, so what is the criteria that you look at then? I mean, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of youngsters looking at this, saying, "Well, this sounds really good." What will you be looking for when you make that choice?
Primarily, just people who enjoy the hobby, people that we can send to set a good representation of what amateur radio for young people is like in the UK. Even if you're not someone who takes part in every contest, if you're not active in your local raynet, if you have fun with amateur radio, send me an application still. We need to show that this is something that's still relevant and exciting for young people in the UK.
Okay, so I mean that's Jota, but what about the rest of it? How do you engage, say, a 11, 12-year-old might be interested in electronics, but they're playing their games and all of the other wonderful technology that's available to youngsters now? How do you sell amateur radio to them?
By pointing out what they're missing. If you've got a young person who's got a game that they play, do they know that the connection from their controller to their PlayStation or whatever runs on RF energy? Do they know that the characters in their game talking on radios, they can talk on radio in real life? These are the small things that you point out to someone, and a whole new avenue is open to them as they realise that they can be like the character in their game, chatting with their friends on 2 meters or across the world on HF.
I'm asking, I'm being devil's advocate, as you know I've got to be. You know, it was easy years ago. You could sell this hobby to youngsters who maybe didn't know how to meet and talk to people anywhere in the world. Telephone calls were really expensive. Internet hadn't been heard of. Now they're all around and they're WhatsApping friends and from anywhere in the world. So I mean, it is a hard sell. And I'm a chairman of a club in Norfolk, and I know it's difficult to engage young people. So what's the unique things that you're offering to youngsters, apart from the things you've already mentioned, to why amateur radio will be so good for them?
To message someone in another country on WhatsApp, you have to know them already, and you have to have put the effort in and become friendly with them. Whereas amateur radio, you set up your station and there's a world of people ready and waiting. You don't have to already know them. As much as you want to be their friend, they are happy for a nice 15-minute chat. And for younger people, you may go to college or university, bump into someone in the corridor and have a chat. It's just like that on the bands, and you get to experience someone else's worldview and what makes the hobby fun for them for those 15 minutes.
And of course, I mean, there's the other side of it, which if we can get youngsters interested in making stuff themselves, you know, that's also another area they can get involved. I mean, already in schools now, things like coding is taught, light electronics at least is taught. That's another way we could get them engaged.
Yes, of course. I think we had an M7 winner in the construction contest. They built an aerial out of old USB cables.
Very enterprising.
Very enterprising and innovative. Young people have fantastic ideas with electronics, and who knows, maybe someone out there has an idea for turning a clothes airer into a HF antenna. I would like to see that.
What would that be resonant on? I'd love to.
Exactly.
Right. I get
getting young people the skills and opportunities to get the ideas in their head out is a fantastic thing, and we get all kinds of inventions from it.
Well done for what you're doing, and it's really important. I think all of us who care for the hobby realise we must encourage youngsters into the hobby, to look for the next 10, 20, 30 years and more. So thanks very much for all you do. This has Bob Titterington. We met last year, I think. We did your G3ORY.
I am.
I can't remember everybody's call signs. I'm sorry, so I had to look at your badge and cheat there.
That's fine.
What's changed in the world of ARDF then since we talked to you last year?
Yeah, well, not a lot really, because we're still having this post-COVID issue of people finding it, how can I put it, or not coming back to this aspect of the hobby. Either they've got older or their lifestyle has changed slightly, and so a lot of people disappeared when COVID came along and haven't come back. And so we're still trying to recover the sort of numbers doing direction finding, and it is still tremendous fun. And we really enjoy it. So,
and I think, I don't want to get political about it at all. I mean, we all know COVID hasn't gone, but I think we most of us accept that it's here to stay now, and we have to live around it. But lots of clubs and organisations have had difficulty getting back to normal. My own club has as well. One of the wonderful things about yours, that strikes me, though, is it's an outside activity, which we know from those early days of COVID, where you can safely be outside, and I guess this is something you could do socially distanced if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, we ran some events during the course of COVID where we eliminated cash handling, arranged a method of verifying that you'd visited each of the transmitters, which did not involve any contact mechanism. You just had to identify a code and write it down and say what it was at the end, so there was no direct contact involved, and that was fine. How can I put it? So...
Well, we've got people watching now, maybe they've never tried amateur radio direction finding. What would you say to them to get involved with the hobby? How would you say to them, how do they get started for a start?
Well, I say to them, it's a great outdoor sport, and it is taking some exercise, which we all know is good for us, but it's with a purpose. And if the choice is between running around the streets outside your home rather than coming out and doing some radio fun activity, the radio fun activity wins hands down every time. And at a weekend you can turn out and go around your local country park and hunt down a few transmitters and meet up with like-minded people.
And is this something that the equipment that you need? I've seen commercial equipment, but it's something you can build yourself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's usually loan equipment available. In fact, if I can just reach behind me, there's one of the loan receivers, which was available to people who come and take part in simple events, and lend them a receiver. This is an 80-metre receiver, very compact, and perfect for the job. It's fine-tuned to be useful for direction finding.
Is there any other aerial involved, or is that it?
That's it.
Right.
And there's two aerials there.
Yes.
There's the ferrite rod here.
So that's for directional, I guess, is it?
Well, that's directional up to the point that there is ambiguity, because if I get a signal null, say in that direction, I don't know whether it's that way or whether it's that way. And so it's a case of press the button, that button there, and turn the radio in the two directions, and the strongest one tells you which of the ambiguous two it actually is.
And what's this other one? This
That's
is a stub
the sense
antenna
aerial, because this sensing depends on having the H field, the magnetic field, picked up by the ferrite rod, and having the E field, the electric field, picked up by the very short whip. And then when you combine them, if you combine them one way round, they'll add in phase. When you combine them the other way round, they add an antiphase, and so you then get this difference between the two directions of the null, and that's how 80-metre receivers function.
And I mentioned a minute ago about making your own equipment. Is this homemade?
It is homemade. You can buy a Chinese kit from a UK supplier, where you get all the necessary parts, build up the PCB, all through-hole components. This particular receiver has some surface mount in it, and so we're very aware that that's difficult for a lot of people, whereas the Chinese, everything through hole, it lends itself to home construction more readily.
Easier to make, yeah. Well, Bob, thanks very much for joining us again.
Okay.
I hope that people are interested in this. If they want to get in touch with you or to find out
more, go onto the RSGB website, and if you go onto main site, on the air, you'll find over on the right-hand side an ARDF tab. Just click on that, and all the information is there.
At the moment, I'm joined by Roger Cooke, G3LDI, the GB2CW coordinator for the RSGB. So, Roger, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the RSGB asked me to do the GB2CW coordination about 15 years ago now.
15?
About 15 years ago, yeah. And we set that up, and along with Phil Brooks, we got people interested in CW and put people into tutoring CW, organised classes on the air, and we're trying to encourage clubs over the UK to have GB2CW oriented classes, which is very difficult. A lot of people do it on Skype anyway, teach CW on Skype, not known about, but it would be far better if they use CW via the GB2CW.
So with GB2CW, you've got a group of people who actually run sort of more classes or practice sessions, or I don't know how you want to describe it, on air.
On air. We do it on 2 metres in Norwich. We have about 4 tutors altogether. And it's treated in much the same way as GB2RS. We use the call sign, but then we revert to using CW, of course. So we merely say this is G3LDI going over to GB2CW. Because we're broadcasting to several different people at once. And yes, the classes are very interactive, all on the same frequency, on 2 metres. They become a little bit competitive with each other.
Absolutely. It's what radio amateurs do.
Precisely. And it's a very interesting way of learning CW.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any idea of how many people actually follow those classes?
No.
I mean, do they call in at the end, or how do you know who's there?
Well, we gather the class to start with. You see, they all call in on frequency on FM. And we have feedback on FM after every broadcast. And we have various different broadcasts that we use. Groups, number groups, plain language, cut numbers, all that stuff. And then we see how they're doing.
And I know that the schedule's on the RSGB website, isn't it? So people can see when there's going to be a practice session in their area and on what frequency.
That's right.
You do that on HF as well, or
they do
try
one or two
try it local?
On HF, but that doesn't work very well.
Right.
We find that 2 metres is much better. And we encourage 145 250 to be used normally, and or the local repeater. The local repeater is a very good method actually, because it not only caters for everybody who's in the group, regardless of what antennas they've got, it also spreads the word in a wider area.
Because other people hear it then, and word of mouth is a great advertising medium, isn't it? It really is. Okay, so you've been doing this for 15 years then. Why Morse code for you? Morse code or CW, whichever way you want to describe it.
Well, when I was first licensed in the dark ages, it was CW only anyway, and we had to learn CW and pass a Morse test. So I was dragged up that way, and I like to think that people can get the same pleasure from the mode that I get from it.
And of course it's not part of the licence and conditions now.
No, it doesn't.
But it's still very popular, and the people who enjoy it really enjoy it. They're not doing it just to pass the test, are they?
No, they're not. No, they have got no test to pass except the proficiency.
There is absolutely. We run the proficiency scheme as well.
Test,
So people can get a certificate. They can pass the test and get a certificate if they want to. But it's not part of their licence progression. Because some people used to feel that held them back from going from a Class A to a Class B to a Class A.
Yes, precisely.
But that's taken away. But there's still a lot of enthusiasm for it.
Yes, there is.
Now, do do you think, because we hear these things all the time, that Morse code is dying and all of that sort of stuff? What's your view?
I don't think it's dying to any extent, really.
No.
A lot of the youngsters are coming along, and they're getting a great kick out of using a secret code that their parents can't understand.
That is definitely something I've heard. Yeah, yeah.
And they like that sort of thing, you see, and promoting that sort of activity is good.
Yeah. We definitely see that at the National Radio Centre.
Yeah.
I was talking to you earlier, but we hear from the volunteers there that the youngsters come in, and they love that code that their parents don't understand, that sort of thing. But we also offer these, we call them the snail Morse kits at the NRC. Just a very small little kit made with a cable tie and a drawing pin and a battery and a sounder, so they can make their own key. And that we pass those out to youngsters that come in that show an interest.
Yes.
And I've got a brilliant story about that. Indulge me for a second. So one of the youngsters, there was a young girl came in, and she wanted one of these kits, but then she emailed me later and said there was no instructions in the kit. So I sent her the PDF for the instructions, and then she wrote to me in Morse code afterwards to say thank you. And she's now gone on to pass her license, and her father's got involved as well. He's taken his license, and he's now a volunteer at the NRC.
Very good.
This has all come from a little bit of Morse code, but she wrote this letter in Morse code back to me. So absolutely the youngsters love it, I'm certain. Not all of them, but it's got something, isn't it?
Yes, it has got something too. In our Barford rally that we have in Norfolk every year, we have a CW stall, and we have a certificate that we can give children having sent their name in Morse. So we have a key on the table, they come along and we show them how to send the Morse, and they think that's great. They can go away with a certificate saying that they've used Morse code.
So you have the Morse code written out for them, and they can sort of look up the letter and things like that.
And you'd be surprised how efficient some of these people are.
Oh yeah.
We've got one young student in the Norwich area now. His name's Frankie, and he's 12 years old. He's extremely keen, and we're encouraging him to take part in the hobby. And he's very keen to use CW. And that is his one aim, is to get up to 25 words a minute.
Oh, okay.
So I've heard. So an excellent aim, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And as well as the people being introduced to it, it is still very valuable for DX and contesting and all of those things as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
because there is a big advantage of using CW when the conditions are a little bit poor. So how popular is that still as an activity?
Well, it's getting more and more popular every year, the CW contests. The CW Ops are an organisation in America that accept members who can use CW proficiently, and they encourage people to join as members. And we have activity periods every week. We have contests every year, and there's quite a lot of people join that one. And there are quite a few CW clubs around as well. Fists, FOC, and all sorts of CW clubs.
And a lot of those, it's all about the expertise, isn't it? And
and
beyond what you might call proficiency, that they take it to a next level, don't they? In some of those groups.
Looking back, you see, when I was a boy, a 10 or 11-year-old boy, my excitement was obtained by watching somebody use a Morse key with a pair of headphones on. And I said, I want to do that. And I've done that, so I can't see why youngsters these days can't have the same objective. The problem is they're led down all sorts of other scientific routes.
There are so many things, that's the thing. But if it's something that interests them, then we've got a way that they can go through the on-air practice, and they can train and learn.
There's nothing better than sitting in a quiet room with a pair of headphones on, talking to your friend 10,000 miles away, 25 words a minute, without saying a word.
You can do that without disturbing everybody in the house as well, because you're not shouting into the microphone. So it's quietly doing it.
Yes, it's
absolutely
really good mode to operate.
You mentioned the States. I think CW Ops. I think you mentioned over in the States. And I was again, you know me now. I've got loads of stories, but a really big bit of publicity that happens. We're always interested in that sort of thing. We were contacted by the Times newspaper, as it happens, but they'd seen something in the American press about the popularity of Morse, so they came to us and said, is it still popular here? and we put together an article that went in the Times, a bit with Martyn and the Cambridge University Wireless Society. The journalist went there, photos, stories. We set up lots of other interviews with other people that were interested in the science and everything like that. But they focused in on youngsters and Morse code, and that article reached an enormous number of people. We use a media monitoring company to track where all these articles go, and that had a potential reach of 46 million people saw that article. Now we couldn't pay for that sort of advertising, so if we do that, but that came about because the Times came to us and said, is Morse code still popular?
Yeah.
And we just managed to tell 46 million people that it was.
Yes, that's good, isn't it?
And at the NRC, I sound like an advert, sorry, but the NRC, we see about 80,000 people a year come through, and they get to see all of amateur radio, but Morse code is a big part of it. So
yes, it is.
We tell everybody it is not dying. It is
no,
it's
still definitely not dying. It's a shame that they did away with the Morse test, in my opinion.
You see, some people will say that.
Yeah, well, having said that, I mean, I'd done it anyway, so it didn't matter to me, but people coming along into the hobby would possibly say a similar thing.
Yeah.
But I like to promote it as much as we can.
Yeah. Excellent. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Anything else you want to tell people about GB2CW, or even the Morse Proficiency Scheme?
The Morse Proficiency Scheme, well, it starts at whatever speed you want to do it at.
Yeah.
5 words a minute upwards.
Yeah.
So you can get a Morse Proficiency certificate for 5 words a minute, or 35 words a minute.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
But you can get something that says I've achieved this standard and aim for the next one.
It's always nice to have a picture to put on the wall.
Oh yeah.
To say, oh, I have done this.
Yeah, and have the next level to aim at.
And to be able to chat with people around the world as well.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely alive, and we do everything we can to support that, and you do even more, because if you've been doing it for 15 years, I get a feeling you'll know what the state of play is with Morse code.
Well, I've been teaching Morse since 1956.
Oh, there we go. Have you just about got used to it now?
I think I've got the hang of the code.
Just about got the gist. All right. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for spending some time at the convention. Great to talk to you. And
hope I've convinced somebody.
Or more than one, I suspect.
Well, hopefully.
More than one. All right. So. Thanks very much, Roger.
Thank you.
Well, we've got Steve Richards, G4HPE, I hope I got that right, Steve, with us, who's the manager of the GB2RS News Service. And before we talk about what you're doing now and things, let's just explain briefly what that service does. I'm sure most amateurs now watching this will make use of the news that you provide every week. What does it do?
Okay, so GB2RS is the RSGB's news outlet, live on the air for radio amateurs. Every single Sunday, 114 people are involved in 75 live broadcasts. On top of that, we also put out web material, both in podcasts and pre-recorded video. And it's the news of the week. So it's a really important way of informing not only radio amateurs, but any listener or viewer that happens to be out there about what's happening in amateur radio. So today, Sunday, I've managed to excuse myself from my morning reading, but I will be on top band as usual tonight at 9:30, so I shall have to scarper to do that.
So, I mean, where does this news all come from? And are you the editor, are you the collator of the information, or?
Not really, no. I'm the nuts and bolts man, if you like. I look after the news reading team, and that's quite a large volunteer team, as you can imagine. But the actual news material comes from the RSGB, from the same editorial desk that produces the news for Radcom, for example. So I get involved in the proofreading of the script before it goes out, and then it's published to the newsreaders.
So of course that means that doing this every week, though, it means it can be quite current. I think you publish on a Friday, something like that?
That's right, on the Friday. So yes, the news is quite current, and it would certainly not be beyond us to produce a last-minute news story if it had enough gravity to it, even over the weekend to the newsreaders.
So the news comes in to HQ basically during the week. You help put it together for the script. We're looking at what, 15-20 minutes on an average broadcast, do you think?
Well, it's probably 20 to 25 minutes, depending on how many big stories there are. But actually, on top of that, if you include the local news, there's a very big segment of local news. Our clubs are really vital in sending in the information about what they're doing in the current week. And if you just read out one section of local news, that can add 5 to 10 minutes. But there, of course, there are some readings which cover quite large geographical areas, and that can often add even another 10 minutes to that. So sometimes the news reading is beyond half an hour.
Now, do you just rely on clubs and news reporters and things to send you, or can any member of the RSGB, or any radio amateur indeed, send information for GB2RS News?
That is absolutely the case, David, and also we would really encourage people to send in stuff that they're doing. Even only just down on the Bailara stand today, they're cooking up some ideas for an anniversary that's coming up, and well, GB2RS would love to be able to reflect that on the air.
And is it just on radio? Because I think I'm sure someone reads it on BATC on television now as well.
That's absolutely
is that right?
There's a full reading. In fact, there are several visual readings with captions as well. Most of it is live. Some of our newsreaders pre-record so that they can edit out little errors that they've made. But it is mainly a Sunday broadcast at the moment. But we see subtle changes coming along. For example,
I was wondering about that.
Yes,
yeah.
well, last year we were able to secure the use of QO100 for the GB2RS broadcast. This has suddenly therefore become an international broadcast, and we've got to think very carefully as the RSGB about versioning that output now for an international audience. Okay, they might not be so interested in our local club news, but they're very, very interested in what we're saying about the current news services. And I think it's been really taken on board because we were able to discuss with ANSAT the idea of a news channel, and they actually have allocated a dedicated news channel on their narrowband transponder. And okay, it's just GB2RS at the moment, but we're talking very hard at the moment with our colleagues, our neighbours in Europe, about the idea of other news services coming onto that channel and actually having an almost, we hope, in the end, a continuous news broadcast.
That's incredible to think about international news for
yes.
amateur radio. What else for the future then of the GB2RS News Service?
Sure. Well, we already broadcast on 10 amateur bands in 8 different modes. There's always proposals for more modes. So we're talking really quite seriously now about some data modes again. But we did RTTY in the past and things like that. But what about some of the newer modes that are now available? Some of these things are incredible and can be heard worldwide again. Also, the world of digital voice is really developing at a tremendous speed. It seems to me that many people enter amateur radio now because they come across digital voice before they come across anything else in amateur radio. And the interesting thing about digital voice is that, well, you don't really know where it's ending up. Once someone has put something onto a talk group, for example, it could be ending up anywhere, and probably is all over the world. That's quite interesting because trying to gauge the audience of GB2RS is incredibly difficult when you're not even really sure exactly where it's ending up.
No, that's fantastic. Well, Steve, thank you very much for all the work you do, and of course all the newsreaders and everybody else who contributes to it. Remember that you can send information, news and anything to Steve's team to, I think it's rsgb.org/radcom?
It's radcom at rsgb.org.
Radcom, sorry.
Yes, indeed.
That's where you can send news and get involved. Thank you very much for joining us today, Steve.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, while it's Ofcom that decide what our licence is going to look like ultimately, of course, to take the exams to get those licences takes quite a lot of work by quite a lot of people. I've got 2 people with me here on the 2 of the committees that deal with the exams and the courses and things that we run from the RSGB. So it's real nice to welcome Andrew Lenton, G8 GUUG, and you're in the new position, I think, as the chair of the Exams and Syllabus Review Group.
Correct, yes.
Welcome to you. And Tony Kent, G8
Hello.
BBH. Hello, Tony. You're the Examination Standards Committee chair.
That's correct.
They sound fairly similar to a lot of people. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is ask you to tell us, just quickly define what you do. So Andrew, first to you.
Okay. The ESRG is a group that look at the Ofcom requirements and the international requirements, and we write the syllabus to cover all the requirements needed to become a radio amateur, and which also includes not just the technical aspects but the safety and also the regulations regarding your licence, what you can and cannot do at various levels. We have 3 licences, basically the novice, intermediate and advanced, and there's an exam.
That'd be the foundation intermediate.
Yeah, sorry.
I just want to get that right.
I'll use the old term. Yes,
all right.
foundation, intermediate and advanced. And we have a level exam for each level, and we've recently introduced a direct to full, which is sort of aimed at people who are coming from a communications world or professionals, ex-armed forces, who know their way around a radio, and it's to save them going through all the steps. They can come straight in.
Okay, great, thank you. Tony, what is your committee group?
Okay, well, as you know, Ofcom allow the RSGB to administer the examinations, amateur radio examinations, and the Examination Standards Committee has oversight of the standard of the exam to ensure that it is fit for purpose for the issue of the amateur radio licence. So we work in collaboration with Ofcom. There's an Ofcom representative on the committee, and we essentially set down, if you like, the standard that ESRG works to.
So you'll set out the exams and the content that you need to teach.
Yes.
You're going to make sure that it fulfills that and that the exams run.
And that Ofcom remain content with the level that we're setting things at, and will continue to allow the RSGB to run the exams, which is of course great for the amateur radio community, that we can run it all from within the RSGB, rather than, for example, having to go out to an external exam board, which may have higher costs and more inconvenience. So that's quite important that we.
It is. It's a lot of work. I guess. How many in each of your committees, Tony, in yours? Or
there's on the books. There's probably about 15 of us.
Really?
Yes. Some have lapsed a little bit, but people have work commitments. It's all on a voluntary basis. Yeah. So we have a minimum quorum of about 6 to 8 people, and we look at things like there can be challenges to questions. So we'll look at challenges and see if they're relevant, correct, or whether we can change the English or something like that.
So do you set the questions, your group?
We set, yes. We had a pool of questions because we've had historic questions. But as the exam licensing is changing, we've got to make new questions, and more so we've got to weed out questions that are no longer relevant. There will be probably intermediate questions or that are no longer relevant because the licensing conditions have changed, and there's extra ones. Foundations are giving more privileges, so we've got to make sure they understand what new privileges they have.
And of course, we'll talk in a minute about maybe some of the changes that are just on the horizon there.
That's exactly.
I mean, Tony, for you, one of the biggest changes I'd have thought in the last few years, when COVID hit, the RSGB were really quick to adapt completely online exams.
Yeah.
And I mean, but that must have meant that you had to prove to the Ofcom that everything was still going to be tested when people could do their exams and the course indeed,
and it could be done safely. From
home.
I mean, just to go back to your question, the original question, there's about roughly 11 people on the ESC. That includes, of course, Ofcom, and also the Air Cadets have a representative, because, as you know, the Air Cadets, they have their own training course, but we can give a foundation licence, so the standard meets those requirements. So yes, about 11 members, and yes, we had to deal with the online exams. Things like, when we had to discontinue the practicals or practical assessments, which we've stuck with because of the improved accessibility. So yes, we had to deal with that during the COVID period. It was quite important to respond quickly.
Well, yes, and it was really good. I mean, people were able to, and indeed we were able to encourage people to. It's a great hobby to do from home and safely with COVID here. So thanks to both of you for all the work that you did to make that happen really quickly as well. But as I mentioned a moment ago, of course, and we'll all know about the consultation document that's just closed from Ofcom, where some really big changes are proposed. Now, although we don't know the results of those yet, I think it's fair to say, it would be reasonable to assume there's going to be some changes at least. It's whether they'll all be adopted or there's obviously a lot of responses, over 1,000 responses, I believe.
Yes, I'm assuming there's about 95% is going to be implemented.
Right, okay.
So we've prepared draft documents assuming that, and then we can tailor it towards the end. And if we waited until we got the final result, we wouldn't have time to then change the syllabus and issue the questions.
So you've got to start working on it, assuming that I guess nearly all of them are going to be carried on, and then just not implement some of them.
Indeed, yes.
That's a big challenge.
It is a big challenge, and our documentation is such that it's not easily searchable. So when we make a change, we can't do comparisons because we PDF stuff to go on the website, and then if it's altered in any way, it then doesn't represent the Word document. So there are some challenges.
The challenges, obviously, you've got books out there to support, and of course, lots of clubs do lots of training and things as well.
On the club side, of course, the fact that the COVID took it away from the clubs. And in many ways, the clubs really want it back because they want to actually be able to run courses to attract members to the clubs, and that's a bit of that's gone. So I think we need to concentrate so the clubs can do the courses, run the courses, and prep the students.
I mean, certainly from my own club, I know that there's quite a few people who are sad that the practical aspects have all gone, because for many people now, anybody, they can get a license without ever having to go on air or anything if they want to. And what do you, I mean, there must be a criticism that you've both heard about at least. I mean, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, we're sort of aware that some people have, you know, sort of, perhaps they're sad to see the end of that. But on the other hand, there's people that have embraced it, and there's online courses that are now possible because people can study at home. And you know, it's made the course much more accessible to candidates who may not live conveniently near a club or have an active club, you know, in their area. So you know, there's, as with all these,
there are pros and cons.
Clubs that do want to have people come to their location and do the course have the advantage that they can use the practical elements as demonstrations to improve learning. So it's only the assessments. It's only the sort of formality of assessing the practical that's gone out, not the ability to actually do them in a club setting. And people can do, you know, still go on air supervised and do those things in a club setting. So actually, that's a value added that the clubs can offer. But you know, you've got the online courses.
Wonderful.
There for those that
thank
want
you.
those.
We've got to go to a lecture live now, but thank you both very much for all the work that you do, and good luck with the changes, whatever they may be. I'm with David Delahaye at M0MBD. You're with the regional team. You're the forum chair, I believe,
correct,
and also regional representative for Region 12.
Region 12, yeah, which covers Norfolk, Cambridgeshire, Suffolk and Essex, which is a fine old area.
But you're here specifically for the convention as well, I believe, involved with the Buildathon that was here running yesterday all day.
That's right. We had a very successful day, had over 27 people in building kits throughout the day, all different levels of expertise, and we're trying to ensure that people get to grips with practicalities of amateur radio as well. There's obviously with the practicals being removed from the examination process these days, we're quite keen to ensure that people get hands-on experience in making things as well.
I mean, the intermediate, we used to teach people to solder and how to make a simple kit and that sort of thing.
All sorts of things,
like that. But
that practical event, that practical side of the hobby is still very important. It's really, a lot of people would say it's the core of the hobby in the past, and it seems to have dropped off. We're trying to make sure that there's some attention paid to it and get people building stuff.
I mean, is it also because maybe the sophistication of the rigs and things that we see now, it almost feels like you can't make one of those. I mean, I've got a kit at home that I bought, an Elecraft KX3. I'm a little bit disappointed, I must say, though, that it's just really putting some circuit boards together and doing a bit of alignment. So, I mean, is it because those sort of things are impossible to build?
Well, they're not impossible to build. There are sort of advanced kits of transceivers and that you can build, but it is a bit of a challenge. The technology, for surface mount technology that's used in a lot of stuff these days, isn't to everyone's cup of tea. You don't need a soldering iron and a pair of hands anymore. You need a microscope sometimes to do this stuff. So there are a lot of other ancillary equipment that you can build,
So what were they building yesterday, for example, on the build-a-thon?
There's a number of things. There's Morse tutors. There's a little 40-meter transceiver kit. There's transmatch antenna matching units for little things for SOTA, and they just introduced a 2-watt CW transceiver, which was all on a little board like that big, and it's all.
And you taught people how to solder. If they came along and said, "I've never built anything," you would teach them how to do that.
We did have a couple of people that their attempts looked like they tried arc welding before, but we managed to unscrabble that and get them on the right way. So there were people. There's a young lad turned up, never soldered before in his life, got him soldering, and he walked away with a stereo FM receiver. Really nice little kit. And I do have to mention Kanga Kits, who supplied all the kits that the participants bought yesterday. They went above and beyond. They really did to help out with a few mangled parts here and there. They said, "Oh, just take some out of this kit," and they were really helpful. So hats off to the guys. They really know how.
Now, obviously, the Build-a-thon's something we can't do very often as a national event. We've obviously done it at the convention. But is this something that as well you're going to help and get involved with your regional hat on?
Absolutely. We've already, there's been a couple of articles this year already in Radcom about some Build-a-thon events that have gone on. The Beamish Museum event, the CS, the Chelmsford Engineering Society event that we had 73 kits built in a weekend there by children and their families. They all came through, and that was a very, very interesting weekend. Beamish was very successful, I believe, as well. I haven't finished reading the article yet. Only got my Radcom on Friday, so.
So it's something that you'd encourage clubs. Is it a good way? I think if I can share with you something. I mean, as you know, I'm chairman of the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, and I know there'll be lots of people watching this now who are in different clubs all over across the land. But I think it's fair to say that everybody I know of in other clubs have found the same thing, that since COVID we haven't had quite the attendance before. We've all got used to doing lots of things online, but getting the people back in to the clubs is difficult. So I'm thinking of practical skills wise, is this a sort of great thing to do to get people coming back into the clubs again?
Well, the Chelmsford Club that actually helped me with the Chelmsford event that we did, they actually had an idea that sprung off the back of them helping to put this Build-a-thon on in Chelmsford, and they've gone back to their club and said, right, we've got our club AGM coming up, what we're going to do is have a Build-a-thon afterwards and get everyone along to the AGM, and afterwards we can all sit down and get some soldering irons.
And was that successful? Yeah.
They're planning it. They've planned it, so we'll wait to see how that goes. But I think anything that actually gets people involved in doing stuff again is obviously a benefit, and the regional team can help with that. We can help with organising things. There's, when you're trying. One of the things that we're using Build-a-thon to promote is outreach.
Just for everybody at home now who doesn't know what that means, what do you mean by outreach?
Right,
then?
Outreach. The board actually sat around a little while ago and came up with this idea that we really need to be trying to get new people into the hobby from outside. And how do we do that? Well, there's all sorts of people that we need to go out and talk to, but who's going to do that? Is that going to be you? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be the clubs? Who's it going to be? Well, ideally, it's going to be all of us. But the RSGB have got some expertise in doing things. There's some things that we can help with. So there's things we can put people in contact with people for funding. Money's obviously an issue in some places. So if you want to do hold an event, say for instance I'm doing one. I'm doing a talk to the University of the Third Age, for instance, next month. I'm going to be going out, it's their AGM, they wanted a speaker. I said I'll come and talk about amateur radio. So I'm going to do a presentation, I'm going to get a local club involved to bring some radio equipment along so they can have a look and have a play with things. Fantastic. That's a whole audience that have probably never heard of amateur radio we're getting in front of, and if we get one or two people interested, it's a start. But unless we do these things,
so don't just stick as saying I'm an amateur radio club. We need to think about other people, how we get totally fresh new people into the hobby.
Yes, absolutely.
What else does the regional team do for clubs and individuals over the
Well, we
UK?
obviously go out and visit clubs anyway, so we're always mindful of the needs of clubs, and clubs have felt a bit bedraggled over the past couple of years. Their memberships have fallen. They see that the change of the examination system has cost them in membership.
We should just explain what that means, because now you don't have to do your exam at all, or a course with a club, as you used to have to do with practical assessments for a start. And you don't have to take the exam in a registered venue. You can do it at home online.
So you can do your training online, you can do your exam online. Why do I need to go to a club? Well, if you look at the number of questions, and a lot of people will say there are a load of daft questions that turn up on Facebook where people are asking what people call silly questions. I have to say there's no such thing as a silly question.
Only the ones that aren't asked.
Yeah. But it just shows there's a thirst for knowledge out there. People do want to know things, but why are they not going to clubs? A club is a fantastic resource of knowledge and learning. And help. If you don't know something, why do people not go to clubs? Why do they not like clubs? Are clubs providing the kind of things that people want from a club? So we're not telling clubs how to do anything, but what we want to do is help those clubs where we can. So if they find that they're having problems with something, we'll try and help them in any way we can. Whether that be helping them to stage events. Say for instance, you go to a club and you find then not get very many people joining. How many people know about the club? How do you promote your club to the general populace? What are you doing to try and attract new members? Have you tried holding events outside of the club in public to attract people?
Things like Science Day may be a good way to get involved.
Absolutely,
at schools.
Anything like that. So I did a talk on Saturday, one of the first lectures in fact, about outreach, and one of the things was where do we go? What sort of people do we need to try and approach, and how can we help as the RSGB? Because a lot of people will go, oh, well, how do I want to go and talk to like an orienteering group. Orienteering, we got the Radio Direction Finder boys right next door here. And orienteering and Radio Direction Finder got so many shared skills. So if you were to go to an orienteering club and do a talk on RDF, you might find that people fancy giving that a go.
Well, David, it's obviously lots of work you do. Finally, before we finish, just to ask you about volunteers. You're obviously completely reliant on volunteers, just like much of the RSGB is. Are you looking for volunteers at the moment? What's the situation?
Okay, well, in the regional team, we have regional reps who are voted for. Okay, so we have elections periodically. So you need to watch out for the posts when they become available.
They cover large areas, don't they? Regional.
Yeah, they cover the regions, and in each of those regions they're split up into districts, and the district reps are volunteers that are appointed by the regional reps. And we're always on the lookout for those, and there are shortages in some areas of people coming forward to make themselves available. And
so how would they get in touch if there's somebody interested in doing that?
It's quite easy. Just go on the RSGB web page, on the website, go into the search box, type in regional team, and all of a sudden you magically get presented with the regional team page, and have a look for your region where you are and see if there's any gaps. There's a list of all the districts and who's in them. Some of them have got vacant by them. If you're in one of those vacant districts, why not apply? Speak to your regional rep and see if you can get involved. It's very rewarding. It can be quite hard going sometimes. You have to commit a little bit of time to it. But I think it's a great opportunity to give back to a hobby that I really, really enjoy, and it's really rewarding.
David, well, thanks very much for joining us today. We've had the web address at the bottom of your screens at home, so you know how to get in touch. Thanks very much for that. And with the RSGB board chair, Stewart Bryant, G3YSX. Stewart, hello.
Hello, David.
Been a busy weekend for you as well,
It
I guess?
has been an incredibly busy weekend, and it's been great, the atmosphere here at the convention.
Good, yeah, I was going to ask you how you felt. I mean, I know we're here to talk about a few things, but just the convention itself, are you pleased with it?
I am very pleased. I'm glad that it's sort of back in full swing again, and hopefully we'll be back here again next year.
I hope so too, yes, very much so. But let's talk about some of the practical things. I've just spoken to David Haye from the regional team about how running practical courses and getting people making kits is a good way to get amateurs back into clubs and things like that. We've seen a lot of evidence of that here, of course, with the Buildathon yesterday.
Indeed, lots of organisations run Buildathons, and they're very, very popular. At our own club, we have noticed that club projects are a really good way of getting everyone to the meeting. It allows those who are experts to help those who are not so expert, and encourages those who are not so expert to start doing construction. Construction is a very important aspect of amateur radio. I see sort of three pillars. I see the sort of social side, the operating side, but the construction side is the third pillar. It teaches you a huge amount about how radio works. It's therapeutic. It's nothing like building stuff and using your hands and using your mind to solve problems. Construction, of course, includes both software construction and hardware construction. And construction is important not only in terms of learning. It's important in terms of economy. You can build, there's some really, really good cheap kits you can build, some really fantastic quality radio performance. And also, of course, it allows you to build things you can't buy. So you can put together systems and aspects of your shack that you can't just go out and purchase from one of the emporia.
And plus the satisfaction of making something yourself. I mean, as a club, we've often given out simple radio kits. In fact, absolutely simple things like a crystal set.
Yes.
Because if you want to engage a youngster, we've found if you ask them, how would you like a radio that you never need to have a battery, you're never going to run out of credit or anything, and building something simple like that, and the look on their faces when they hear something for the first time in that radio can be wonderfully rewarding, can't it? And the construction takes all sorts. And talking of construction, the RSGB have just launched the construction competition.
Yes, we've launched the construction competition this year. You may recall that we used to hold the construction competition here at the convention, but what we found was that limited the people who could take part to just the people who were going to come to the convention, and that's a lot more people would find it an accessible activity if we put it on the internet. It was one of these COVID things that caused us to move it there, and we've stayed it there. We've kept it there. So this year we've introduced an extra category. So the usual categories we were keeping are construction excellence, the craftsmen, the people who build the nicely polished, really nicely wired, finished, the sort of the model engineering class of construction. And then we have innovation. So here we're looking for people who are moving the art of amateur radio forward. And that could be a real rat's nest in terms of construction quality, but if they do something that moves amateur radio forward, that's where they'll score the points. We have a beginners section. In particular, we have a software and systems section, because software is just as much construction as soldering wires together, and we need to recognise that. Amateur radio has got a lot of software in the way it works. But this year we've introduced an extra one, which is antennas. Antennas are a very, very popular type of construction. We have a lot of entries for antennas, so we thought we would set them up as a category in their own right. The way it works also, by the way, is what we found was that people were not very good at deciding which category they should be in. And we kept, in the early days, we found that someone would be in, construction excellence when they would have won innovation, and the other way round. So now the judges decide which category they are going to judge an entry into, and by doing that, it gives everyone a better chance of winning.
And of course, quality of construction doesn't mean that something has to be really complex and
no.
It's the way it's being made.
Yes, it's
the care that's been taken.
I like to use the term craftsmanship, but it's up to the panel of judges changes each year, and they have a lot of scope for deciding what is best to recognise this group of the set of entries we've received each year.
So now we just launched the competition.
Yes.
How long have people got to enter?
The 1st of March, I believe.
So quite a while.
It's got quite a while. The general idea is that in the dark winter months over Christmas, you can be at home building stuff, or thinking about the design and building it, and then March gives you a bit of leeway to get it in. It's an internet submission. You send an email. We clearly you must have diagrams and pictures, but we like video as well. We like a video of it working, or a video of it doing something, or a video showing how and why it works. And a lot of these entries may get picked up by the Radcom team and published in one of our 3 Radcom magazines.
And talking of Radcom, of course, there's probably been now a lot of information in the latest Radcom about the construction competition, and also on the website, the RSGB website.
Certainly on the website.
How to do that, and it will be certainly in Radcom.
It will definitely be in Radcom.
A little while ago, you mentioned that software can be just as much construction as physical components, resistors, transistors, etc. So last month, the RSGB helped celebrate the National Coding Week.
Indeed.
Just to sort of emphasise that point, really. And in fact, I've got this is just to show everybody at home. This is the latest Radcom, and in there's a really nice double-page spread, if we can get a close-up of that, on the National Coding Week, to show how RSGB clubs and members got involved with the National Coding Week. So, I mean, do you see this as a long-term future? Most radios, for example, now on the market, are software-defined radios. They're based on software.
Well, it turns out that actually a lot of radios that we think as traditional radios are based on SDR. I've got some quite old radios at home, and they used to use a low-frequency IF in order to do everything in software in the end anyway. So software-defined radios are absolutely fundamental. What we're seeing now, of course, is that software-defined radios are, the software is a bigger part of the radio. But software is also important in terms of systems, right? So you may integrate your different components of your station to seamlessly change bands or to operate it remotely. There are other pieces of software that you might want to write. I don't know. You might want to, for example, check what your outgoing power is for EMF reasons.
Very topical now with ICNUB and everything. Yes.
The software that you might enter might also be sort of an offline analysis of something rather than something that's actually making the radio itself work. And if you look at that National Coding Week article, on the one hand, there was some very simple software that is discussed using very entry sort of tile type construction techniques, but there's also GNU radio mentioned. GNU radio allows you to build some very advanced systems, and we encourage people to try radio at all levels, from just putting the software at all levels, from just putting together the modules in a sort of GUI type approach, through to writing assembly code or C or whatever it takes to solve the problem.
Good. We're coming towards the end of our time, Stuart, but it would be wrong to have the chair of the board of the RSGB here without asking you just generally about the work of the RSGB board. I know we've all been very focused on the convention. Now that's just about to be finished.
Right.
What's on your next agenda with the board?
The next agenda item is we've just extracted from the very long list of priorities 3 key priorities that we need to focus on, and they are growing amateur radio. We want to get more people into amateur radio. we need more people to be members of the society. And spectrum and licensing is very key. You see, we've done a lot of work on spectrum and licensing and supporting the team, and that's quite an expensive activity, supporting them to go to some of the meetings that they need to go to in order to influence the regulators, in order for us to keep the spectrum that we've got. We've got 9% of the spectrum. It's an extremely valuable resource, and we have to use it widely and persuade those who allocate it that we're a just case, we've got a just cause.
And I guess in a very commercial world with wireless, pressure on wireless devices all the time, we need to hang on to that spectrum, don't we?
So you should see more work from us in terms of how we encourage people into amateur radio. We're going to set a workshop up to try and work out what some practical things we can do are.
And presumably you're always interested to hear from members as well, if they've got concerns and things that they'd like the board to discuss?
I absolutely like to hear from members about what we should do. But in particular, if those suggestions come with an offer of help, that is extremely welcome. Although the RSGB's got a staff of 18, we couldn't possibly deliver what we deliver without volunteers, and we couldn't afford the volunteers that if we had to pay for them. So we could do with proposals are great, but offers of help are really, really welcome.
All right. Well, Stewart, Bryant, G3Y6, thanks very much for coming to join us today and sharing that with us. Wouldn't be the end of a convention without talking to the man who's really pulled everybody together. It takes a lot of people, a lot of work to pull it together, and this is the man that's done it. Steve Thomas, M1ACB, who's the general manager of the RSGB, but in this context, you're the convention chair as well.
Yeah, a bit of both.
Yeah,
so juggling between.
Like we did about a year ago, almost exactly. You sat down here and said, "Breathe." Yeah. How do you feel now?
Well, first of all, the convention is my favourite event of the year, and we do quite a lot. We do a lot of things in the RSGB. It is my favourite event and activity of the year, and it's pretty good. It's as it feels today, as we haven't quite finished. When you said it's coming to a close, I want to do that because it's never over until it's over.
Yeah.
But the feedback from everybody has been fantastic, and when at the opening on the first day, when we were hoping everything was going to go okay, I said I was doing this for the third year. Convention chair is the third year. Been part of convention for years, but convention chair for 3. And so 3 conventions ago, we had to do it wholly online because we couldn't meet in person. And we wanted then to take the convention to everybody online, and we opened up whole new audiences that way. Last year we had the challenge of making it a hybrid event, if you remember, and we were sitting there hoping that the live streaming and the people coming back in person was going to work, and they came. But I think last year people were still slightly nervous about coming out of lockdown, so people were a little cautious, and I absolutely understand that. We were as well, but that worked tremendously well. So we had hundreds of people here, and we had many people on the live stream last year and watched the recordings and everything like that. And the challenge this year was to try and grow the in-person event back to what it used to be, I think is probably fair to say, while still keeping the hybrid approach and still doing the live stream and everything like that. And we get the challenge of trying to keep that interesting. But the feedback I've had, let's talk about numbers actually. So I said we were hoping that it went back, and it has. We feel it's like telling your friends that you're going to have a party and you hope everybody turns up, right? That's what I liken it to. So we put out we only had 3 months this year. We started a little bit late, and we put out all the invitations, the marketing, the comms, everything, invited people, got the speakers organised. But you hope that once you then open up bookings, that people book. And it was within seconds of it opening that people started booking. And it was great because I know, as you do, hundreds of people here, you know a great deal of these people. It is fascinating to see the people booking, and you start to get more and more confident that this is going to work, and
because it's a difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, we don't want to go into the specifics of costs and things, of course, but you've got to sign up, you've got to commit to the venue, which is probably the largest cost of everything, before
Absolutely.
you've even taken a single booking.
Yes.
So that's quite a difficult thing, because you don't want to overcharge, because you don't want to put the price in that might put people off coming. You've got to give value to your members and all our visitors, but also you've got to make sure it covers its costs.
Yep. It's a
so
very
how do you make that judgment?
It's a fine balance thing. You have to. The first confidence we got actually is when we started asking speakers if they would. Right, the end result this year is we had more speakers than we had spaces for, so that's a really good measure. But we were doing that in parallel with bookings as well. You watch the bookings coming in, you realise that it's going quite well. You hope it's going to carry on that way. A lot of people, by their very nature, leave it quite late to book, so there is this hump at the end. But when we closed the bookings a few days ago, I don't think it's any secret to say we got 400 bookings at that point. 400 people had committed to being here. That might have been overnight stays, 1 night, 2 nights, or day tickets in advance. But we knew if everybody arrived that we were going to get 400 people through the door. Plus the day ticket people that turn up on the door and pay there. So our nervousness moves to that at that point, and we say, I wonder if anybody's going to turn up and do that. And yesterday they definitely did. I haven't got the numbers. I know it was pretty good yesterday, and I don't know what happened today. Saturdays are always busier than Sundays for the
it's a longer day,
itself.
Yeah.
But so we at every point there's an extra bit of nervousness. You worry about bookings. You worry about will speakers come. You worry about will they actually turn up on the day? Will anybody new come up? On the pay on the door, and it's all gone really well. But the level of planning that we have to put in, as you know, because you're part of it as well, is enormous. And I said at the opening that we plan everything, and people just won't realise this, but we plan the details of everything. And for the live stream, you plan it down to the second, don't you? You were telling me just before we came on that when
we've all agreed
over,
to start on exactly the right time now, so we count it down instead of just thinking, are they ready yet?
There is this schedule. It changes a few times. Let's be honest.
Definitely. Right. Night before, I think. This year.
So live TV, etc. It changes, and we've been moving around into interviews and things during the day, haven't we? But there is that plan, and that plan takes an awful lot of work, and then you've got to make it happen as well. But that applies to everything in the convention. So, I'm talking about the accommodation, the bookings, the room bookings, what we put in the delegate packs, the lanyards and the badges that people have, so everybody knows who they're talking to when they're here. And
the nice gift that you give everybody in their room.
Oh,
If you've ever been to a convention, there's a lovely gift every year.
There's a huge discussion about what the gift's going to be every year. So all of that takes planning, and then we have to plan all of the filming and the audio and everything that goes into it. And then we work with the speakers to get their bios and put those on the website. And the speakers often want to change the slot they've got, and there's a huge amount.
We haven't got too much longer, Steve, but I'd just like to ask you, what's your favourite bit then about this year? Is there a highlight of something we did, or a special talk, or something we did?
Well, it's going to be more than one thing, but that's the problem. We had more speakers than we had slots for, right? Fantastic result, because people wanted to talk about amateur radio.
In 10 seconds.
Oh, loads of people, the special interest groups, the committees. I love
and Build-a-thon was nice to see practical stuff back.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is so much stuff that we put in this year, and we'll do it all again.
We will. Steve, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Congratulations on this, but I know lots of people are involved, but well done. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.